Danny, welcome to Glasgow, where we're delighted to be in the offices of ACCA here in Glasgow, who are our partners and sponsors of this morning's event. And we're simply delighted that you've come here to talk to this event at the Asia Scotland Institute, the mission of which is to educate and inspire tomorrow's leaders and to inform them better about Asia. So I can think of no better possible combination of a speaker than yourself. I wonder if we could start off with you just explaining your role within the AIIB now, and then perhaps after that we can talk about the importance of Asia to young people in Scotland.
Well, thank you, Roddy, and thank you, by the way, for inviting me, and indeed for taking the initiative to set up the Asia Scotland Institute. It's something that is very important to Scotland. It has been for many years, the relationship with Asia. As a Scot, I'm living in Asia for the first time in my career, learning a great deal. I'm the Vice President and Corporate Secretary of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The AIIB was established January last year, 2016, to invest in infrastructure that helps to support the sustainable development of the Asian economy. It's a multilateral development bank, so similar in character to the World Bank or the Asian Development Bank. 57 countries came together to set it up. The idea came from China, but very much an international institution. As a minister in the UK government, I was one of the people responsible for arguing that the UK should be an early adopter of this institution, and we've been part since the very beginning. And of course, that's important because for the UK, for Scotland, and of course for Europe, the economic and political relations with Asia are increasingly important. The bank's off to a quick start. We've already invested in 21 projects across Asia and also one outside Asia. So far $3.4 billion of loans. We have very high standards. We have very strong safeguards of things like environment and social policy. And we're focusing on projects that can help connect Asia better, bring Asian countries closer together and bring Asia closer to the rest of the world to promote trade and the movement of people and so on. We're focused on sustainable infrastructure because the challenge of climate change is an enormous one with big implications for infrastructure in the region. And we're focused on mobilising the private sector to invest more in infrastructure in the region because the gap between what's needed and what's currently funded is so large it cannot be met by international institutions and national governments alone.
I know that in your previous incarnation you were a great advocate of the Northern Powerhouse, and of course here we are north of Hadrian's Wall, and it makes me think about the One Belt, One Road, the connectivity between Scotland and the rest of the world, particularly Asia. The One Belt, One Road thing, although it is not exclusively China, I know AIIB is involved with that. Can you comment on that as a way of linking the different countries together?
Yes, I can. One Belt, One Road is a Chinese policy. We're an international institution. But I think many countries share the agenda that for economic prosperity, to raise living standards, to increase productivity, greater infrastructure connectivity between Asia and Europe, and indeed between Asia and other parts of the world too, is vitally important. I was an advocate of the Great Northern Powerhouse, as in the Highlands of Scotland. And whether it's the A9 between Inverness and the Central Belt, or the roads, railways, ports, airports that are needed to bring the UK and Europe and Asia closer together, those are things which will make a great deal of difference to the lives of people all around the world. And that's why, for example, our bank is already investing in railways, in roads, in one port facility so far in our portfolio. We've also been one of the investors in a gas pipeline taking gas from Azerbaijan to southern Europe. And so those are exactly the sorts of things that the AIB will invest in over many, many years to come.
Well, I hope Holyrood is listening to you, and some of that comes up here to Scotland, where it's, I suspect, sorely needed. Let me just change tack slightly now to the century of Asia in which we live, and your advice to young Scotsmen and women about what to think about Asia, what they need to do to get engaged, and why it's important.
Well, I grew up on the island of Colonsay, and I live in Beijing. Two places that are outwardly very different, but in fact have a great deal in common. And I think increasingly, as this century goes on, the destiny of Europeans and Asians is going to increasingly be a common destiny. And if you're looking for economic opportunities, if you're looking for career opportunities, if you want to build a business that's going to be successful in this world, increasingly that engagement with Asia is going to be more and more important. You can look at China, you can look at the growth of India,
Yeah.
you can look at the rise of other countries in Asia too, increasingly we'll see over the coming decades. And I hope that any young Scot who is intrepid, who is entrepreneurial, who wants to develop themselves, will take the time to get to know Asia, will learn an Asian language. I know that there are more and more opportunities to learn Chinese here in Scotland, who will travel in the region, who will think about working for international institutions like the AIB or private sector institutions that give them the chance to understand that. Because one of my observations, having now spent some time living in Asia, is what's going on in that region is far too poorly understood here in Scotland, across the UK, across Europe. And actually, it's very important to understand what's going on in that region, because it will shape the future of this planet that we share, and understanding it, I think, is vitally, vitally important.
Absolutely. Well, here we are sitting in the offices of ACCA. They have a huge footprint in Asia. For them, it's extremely important. And of course, what they're doing is bringing Western developed world qualifications to a very important part of the world. And no doubt, when you speak with the gathering that's going to be here a little bit later this morning, you're going to get a lot of questions about that. So let me really end as I began, which is in welcoming you to Glasgow, to the ACCA's offices. Welcome to this Asia Scotland Institute event, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Roddy. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Dan.